and welcome to Sister Speak Talk Show. My name is Hazel Cherry.
I'm Davia Janelle.
And I'm Angela Jones.
Today's topic is about mental health and wellness. It's a topic that is dear to my heart, having been diagnosed with trauma-induced depression at the age of 10. So today's topic, as it is very, very intimate, we want to just talk about the ways in which Black women suffer from different issues based on what's going on in society. Particularly talking about an article that came out on For Harriet called Being Black and Blue, Female and Depressed by Jasmine Salters. And I thought it was a very important article to bring up because she talks about what is called the Black Superwoman syndrome. This syndrome that says that we have to take on everything and not be real about how it is affecting our health and wellness. What are some of the ways that you all sort of combat the strong Black woman syndrome? I know we've all dealt with it and felt with it, but what are some of those practices that you use to sort of counter that narrative in your own life?
Well, for me, definitely in a patriarchal society, you combat that every day in the workspace, especially if you're trying to balance work and the home life. Even as a single woman, the expectation is that you're supposed to be more domestic or not as career focused. And when you are a strong Black woman and you have goals, that can conflict with the societal norm.
That's good. So let me see, for me, I'm going to have to say it's two things. One, looking at vulnerability as not being a weakness. So I'm really big on looking at what is triggering me, especially emotionally. But then two, I realized that I had a very difficult problem communicating with someone my tenderness, expressing my vulnerabilities. And I used to be a cutter. So it was easier for me to deal with the physical trauma than it was to deal with the emotional trauma, actually exposing what was triggering me. So for me, it was learning that vulnerability wasn't a negative thing and that my strength is found in being vulnerable in a safe space.
Sure. For me personally, it's been about creating those boundaries for self. So if I know that I've been triggered by something, that it's okay for me to step away from that space or that person or that community for a particular amount of time. Now, it took me being in therapy to be able to identify those triggers and identify the communities that bring forth triggers, but it's okay, like to just say it's okay to give yourself personal space so that you can deal with how things are affecting you. You know, Davia, since you talked about being a cutter, I want to thank you for and affirm your vulnerability in that, and I think that's a good place for us to segue into talking about self-harm and the ways that we've learned to heal and from the self-harm that we've inflicted on ourselves.
So with my own narrative and my journey, I've learned both through a spiritual path and through exercising the act of counseling. I did take on a counselor. I've learned that I was inflicting harm upon myself, not just in an abrasive physical manner, but some of my behaviors and tendencies were harmful to what my projection of who I see myself being was. So for example, when I feel like I need comfort, I found myself rushing to the refrigerator. And it was a very unhealthy pattern that I found myself in. I would go to sleep and find myself being very lethargic, so then I was out of energy. So I had to develop different methods to make my, okay, I'm just starting rambling here. So I had to find different methods to create healing practices that were both maybe conventional, i.e. prayer, or talking with some people in my church group or talking to my good girlfriends, but then some more non-conventional ways. So I found that yoga became a very good health practice for me. Stretching, the act of breathing, became a really good practice for me, taking a good couple of minutes to myself and withdrawing when I am feeling stimulated in a way that is unhealthy and uncomfortable for me.
Same for me too. I found that not only is it yoga, but in addition to yoga, it's just learning to meditate. I have a friend who was at Howard Divinity with me, and she was very into meditating. And so just the practice and the art of learning to breathe, especially in those moments where I'm angered or deeply sad, like just the act of breathing and knowing that you're alive is helpful. And in addition to that, journaling has been really good. I love to write, and so in those particular moments, I just go to my journal. My journal has become a place of prayer as well, or a place of lament. And even thinking about lament, I was thinking in preparing for this about, in terms of our spiritual places, how there's not always enough space to just lament.
Correct.
Correct. And going to church and being a person of faith, a lot of times you're just expected to be so joyful, and you know, the joy of the Lord is our strength, and that is so true. But in our sacred spaces, I think there also needs to be space for us to just lament and cry without the usher trying to figure out what's going on, or the reverend trying to lay hands on you. But it's just, no, like, I need to be in community and also cry, like, you know what I mean, at the same time. So I just found those are some very helpful ways for me in particular.
Yeah, I would add to, especially growing up as a pastor's kid, the pressures of being an heiress, or the pressures of being perfect, even though I coined myself a goody two-shoe, always having that certain discernment or convictions to do right. The pressure of always performing well in front of people I knew and people I did not know also put me in a depressing, state. And so for me, just to add on to maybe even the term church hurt, I had to get into a space where I was okay with being alone. And I believe God put me in a place of aloneness several seasons of my life, because that pressure never went away. It came back in different forms. And so I had to learn how to meditate differently. I had to journal, like creative writing, even if it wasn't just my personal experience, getting into a space where I will write about stories of expectations, or something that was encouraging and that I might want to share with someone else. I learned those practices so it could be easier for me to come out when I wanted to sleep all day. The sleeping thing is so you don't have to face it. You know what I mean? So if I wanted to sleep, or if I didn't want to go out, or if I wanted to eat every single thing in front of me, those were helpful ways of, pushing through.
Sure.
So,
and I just want to add one more. I just think the power of music is so beautiful. Like, in those low moments, I just put on NDRE, Erykah Badu. Those are some of my faves. But I'm a 90s girl, so just like all the old school stuff that just sort of ministers to my spirit and sort of ease some of those things away as a sort of a way to cope and like push through it. So I can't let music go. Yeah, for sure.
There are various stigmas associated with mental health. There can be perceived stigmas, there can be social stigmas, or cultural stigmas. Especially as members of the African American community, there are stigmas associated with mental health, seeing a counselor, seeking help. Have you all experienced any of this?
Surprisingly, I haven't. I haven't. It was actually encouraged, especially by my family, because they know my patterns and my habits, and know that I can retreat to isolation, and who knows what can take place in isolation. So when they found out that I did seek out a counselor, it was very much supported and encouraged.
Yeah, same here, and especially when I felt comfortable enough to tell my family and share with my family about it, it opened up a larger conversation about how maybe we all need to go, or just persons being more vulnerable, as you talked about earlier, and the things that they deal with that affect their own moods and issues that they may be dealing with. So it's been received pretty well. I do know that there are still certain sacred spaces where it's still taboo, or everything seems like it could just be prayed away. So I just encourage folks, like, if you are dealing with something or maybe facing any issues, that it's important to see a counselor or talk to someone outside of your pastor or those in your faith community. Yeah.
So there was a quote in one of the articles that, we looked up to share this conversation. I believe the article was in the Ebony magazine. As I'm scrolling up for the title, it's called Depression and the Black Superwoman Syndrome. The quote shared in here said, "I honestly believe we're so accustomed to delivering the strong Black woman speech to ourselves and everyone else that we lose our ability to connect to our humanness and thus our frailty." And I think as we close, it's very important that we always encourage one another, and especially our communities, the larger communities, and just the global community, to connect to your humanness. if your humanist says that you need sources of healing, if you need sources of counseling, don't be afraid to go there, because our mental health is very important.
Ashe, and please feel free to check our comments box where we will have posted resources and books that you all can look at that pertain to mental health so we can all be whole together. Thank you for tuning in.
Bye.